So today is Sunday, the 26th of January, and I want to speak today about metta as the universal language of the heart, about the qualities of metta, about what metta is, what metta isn't. It's so beautiful here, and it's so beautiful to be here in this incredible place created from metta, created from pure well wishing with so much work, effort, energy, dana, so that we can all come here to practice, to share the Dhamma together, to live the Dhamma together. And it's so beautiful that we cultivate metta in many languages. I was reflecting last night in the chanting, the number of languages that metta can be expressed in that we chant. Pali, English, Spanish, Swiss German, Sanskrit, Spanish. These are all just the chants we do here. But metta can be expressed in any language. Metta is expressed through language, but transcends it. It's so much deeper than simple words. And I want to speak about metta, the qualities of metta, this morning or this afternoon, because it's important to know what we are cultivating, what it is that we're giving rise to with this practice, what it is we're inclining to, what it is we're strengthening. This is where language can be difficult, it gets in the way. We use the Pali word metta as opposed to any translation. The English translation of metta most commonly is loving kindness, which is so misleading because it makes people think of love, which is absolutely not metta. I'll have more to say about that. Metta isn't conventional love. It's much simpler and more profound than that. In one of his short practice manuals, Sayadaw U Indika defines metta as the wish for the welfare and benefit of living beings. Simple. Simple well wishing. It's benevolent. The Visuddhimagga speaks about benevolent regard for the welfare of others. And this is metta, kind wishes for others' good fortune, goodwill. It's associated with friendliness, open heartedness, generous acceptance. In fact, complete, wholehearted acceptance of ourselves and of others. The willingness to let ourselves and others be the way we are, without negativity, without judgment, or any trace of ill will. In the commentaries, um, metta, it says metta is derived from mitra, friend. This is that reference to friendliness. And it says it protects through a wish to promote well being and safeguards from harm. Friendliness, it seems so casual, but this is a much more profound friendliness than conventional friendliness. But it's also this aspect of friendliness is really important to remember. Because if you think of how you relate to a good friend, a beloved friend who isn't perfect, you just take them as they are. There's this beautiful acceptance of the faults that we all have, because we're all in samsara, we're not perfect. It's this beautiful acceptance of imperfection and kind well wishing anyway, no matter what. And that protects the relationship, safeguards the relationship from breaking apart because of judgment, ill will, resentment, any negative state that can get in the way. So, friendliness may sound quite casual, but it's actually very powerful. Goodwill and benevolence really also capture this feeling of what metta is, how it manifests. They seem rather formal. It doesn't capture the kind of the feeling tone of metta. In the Visuddhimagga, it describes the function and manifestation of metta as preferring welfare, of promoting welfare. So this state of heart prefers the welfare of living beings and promotes that. And importantly, in the same passage in the Visuddhimagga, it speaks of the proximate cause of metta being seeing the goodness or the lovability of others and ourselves. And this is one reason why Sayadaw said in his last talk not to focus on the things that bother us about other people, but to see the goodness in them, see whatever glimmer of goodness they may have. Some people have a lot, some people have less, but everybody has something good. As Sayadaw said, it's very rare to have completely evil people or completely perfect people. We're most of us somewhere in between those two extremes. So to incline to seeing the goodness in others is what gives rise to metta. And when you think about your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your friends, family members, coworkers, it can be very interesting to notice how seeing the goodness is not the first thing that usually happens. For some of us, anyway. It's very easy to overfocus on what we feel is wrong about ourselves or about other beings. And in that situation, of course, metta will not arise when all we can see is what bothers us about somebody or something. But to unhook from that obsession, which it can be with what's wrong, and incline to seeing the goodness is an actual very powerful inclination of the mind that allows metta to arise. In the commentaries, metta is likened to the protectiveness of a mother for her child, and it is so beautiful. And this springs from, of course, that line in the Metta Sutta. Even as a mother protects her child, her only child, with her own life, so one should develop towards all beings a state of mind without boundaries. That line in the Metta Sutta. So, as a mother with her only child, and in the texts, it's not just as a mother to her son or a mother to her child, it's a mother to her son, her only son. There's that emphasis. An only child is precious, unique, greatly loved. And a mother will protect her only child with her entire life without question. And there are incredible stories of mothers doing incredible things to rescue their children from, a car, for example, that's about to run over them, or, something that's fallen on top of them. Superhuman abilities that can come when there's this wholehearted desire for the welfare of another being that will even put your own life at risk. This is metta. This is the power of metta. And in the Visuddhimagga, it speaks of metta, it speaks of the four Brahma Viharas with um, metaphors about a mother and a child. And metta is described as simple. It's a mother with a very young child who simply wants them to grow up happily. That's all. Metta is, of the four Brahma Viharas, the most basic, the foundation of compassion, the foundation of mudita. So, like a mother with her child. And these metaphors are so powerful because they emphasize the boundless, total acceptance and well-wishing of metta and the protectiveness of a good parent. That boundlessness of metta, that protectiveness that arise in every situation, no matter what. Metta doesn't depend on certain conditions to arise. It doesn't require other beings act or speak towards us in a certain way. It's without boundary, without limit. No matter what, there is this gentle, tender, and yet incredibly powerful well-wishing. And all beings deserve metta simply because we are all alive in this ground of samsara. No matter what our situation, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, no matter how pure our hearts are or not, no matter what religion, no matter what anything, nationality, gender, you name it, everybody deserves metta, that complete, courageous well-wishing, no matter what. So the Visuddhimagga further defines metta and clarifies what it isn't by speaking of the near and far enemies. Enemies being the opposites of metta. The near enemy is something which imitates metta, but isn't. it's, it's it's something that appears on the surface to be metta, or we assume to be metta, and something that comes close but isn't. So the near enemy of metta is sentimental attachment, conventional love, if you like. And this is why language is very difficult here. It's important to understand that sentimental, emotional attachment we can have for other beings, this is something other than metta. It's clinging. So when there is clinging, when there is that kind of emotional attachment, please know that to be the near enemy of metta. Sometimes people come to report their practice when working on the category of the dear person. At first, people will come in and say, "Oh, there's so much metta. I just love my daughter or whoever it is so much." And we just sit back and think, we'll see. A couple of days later, people will come in and say, "Oh, that wasn't metta, was it?" Yeah, correct. It wasn't. It's attachment. So metta is not love in that conventional sense, in that attached sense. And when you think about it, think about what happens to that kind of love. When somebody says or does something that we find objectionable or harmful or painful, this is why those kind of attached relationships can turn so poisonous. They turn to hatred very easily. But metta, of course, doesn't change no matter what. So, no matter what somebody does or says to us, it doesn't change the metta at all, not one bit. So, the near enemy of metta is something to look out for. It's often emotional, it comes with a real affective tone, and it comes with kind of a leaning in, oh, that kind of sense of, oh, yeah. Metta is not that. Metta, the essence of metta is cool and peaceful and quiet. It's a simple flow of well-wishing, no matter what. It doesn't come with much feeling necessarily. So that's the near enemy. The far enemy, of course, is the pure opposite of metta, which is ill will. This is much easier to discern and to see in the practice because it's so obviously different. Any form of ill will. And because metta is the opposite of ill will, these two cannot coincide. So when metta is present, ill will is absent. When ill will is present, metta is absent. And you get this substitution of opposites that can be quite striking and quite sudden. So we can be going along radiating metta, say, for a difficult person and be filled with resentment and anger, and maybe even rage, but persistently just inclining to the metta. And then suddenly the mind will shift into pure metta for that person. And sometimes it can be so strong, it's everybody in the room. That's the nature of metta. It replaces ill will, which is its opposite. And there's so many texts that emphasize this relationship of metta and ill will as the opposite. The aspect that metta gives us freedom from ill will, it liberates us from ill will, from anger. And in fact, in the Visuddhimagga, it speaks of different forms of practice for different personality types. And metta bhavana is the ideal form of practice for one who habitually has much ill will. So those of us who are dosa types, this is the practice for us because it purifies the mind of a habit which is deeply, deeply entrenched and predominant. So there's a quote in the Sutta Nipata that I wanted to offer about this. Oh, I'm sorry, the Anguttara Nikaya. Bhikkhus, the Buddha says, I do not see even one other thing on account of which unarisen ill will does not arise, and arisen ill will is abandoned, so much as the liberation of mind by loving kindness. For one who attends carefully to the liberation of mind by loving kindness, unarisen ill will does not arise, and arisen ill will is abandoned. The liberation from dosa is no small thing. It's not the liberation from samsara, but the liberation from dosa is an incredibly liberating experience in this world. And in this world right now, in this moment of time, it's incredibly important that we all cultivate it, because hatred in some circles is becoming fashionable, but we don't have to play that game. That's a worldly game that only leads to suffering, our own and others. We can cultivate metta anyway, cultivate metta instead. It's what we must do in this world, in our lives out there in the world. And cultivating metta here for 2 weeks, as you are doing, is an incredibly beneficial thing to be doing for the world at large. So please, no matter how your practice goes, please remember that. It goes against the stream of hatred that is so powerful in the world right now. It liberates you and those around you from the effects of hatred. So metta, this beautiful, tender, benevolent, friendly state of mind. It's a mind state. It's a quality of heart, really very heart-centered. This is a natural state of mind when the mind is pure. When there are no kilesa, no lobha, dosa, moha, greed, aversion, delusion, metta will naturally arise. And some of you may know this experience from Vipassana retreats. This is very common in a Vipassana retreat, when the mind is quite pure, for metta to arise spontaneously. This is exactly the nature of metta. It arises spontaneously when the kilesa are absent. It's the nature of the pure mind. It arises by itself, like water coming out of a spring. It just bubbles up. So what metta is and isn't, and knowing this, we can actually cultivate metta. Because metta is a natural state, more what we're cultivating is how to access it, how to incline to it, creating a habit of inclination. But we can strengthen it through cultivating. And I love that metaphor of cultivation. And the garden outside the meditation hall here is a visible manifestation of cultivating the ground, causing food to grow. You put seeds in the ground, you weed, you water the sky, but with sun and water in the right conditions, plants grow and come to fruition. In the same way, we can cultivate metta, planting seeds, and with the proper conditions, metta comes to fruition. And as we've said, we cultivate metta here in our own hearts, inside our own hearts. This is a cultivation of heart and mind. We can't emphasize this enough. We say it a lot because it's so easy to forget this. It's not about the other person. It's not about the people for whom we cultivate metta. It's not about results or whatever is happening for them. It's how are we relating to them and their situation, and however it is that we interact. in relationship. Metta is a relational practice, and the cultivation of our own heart is the priority. And I say heart because this is not a heady practice. It's not happening up here in the brain. It happens in the heart. It's definitely a heart state. And it's relational. We'll have more to say about this. But we can't cultivate metta except in relationship. It's a relational practice, metta bhavana. So we need relationship to deepen and cultivate metta. And this is why, as Sayadaw described the categories we go through, we start easily. And as Ariya said, you may be wondering, well, when are we going to move on? Here we are, 3 days in, and we're still with the benefactor. Because this is a relational practice and because we start easy, it's very useful to spend some time at the beginning of the sequence to really cultivate both momentum and strength of the metta and of the practice. And we use different relationships, different kinds of relationships to purify the mind of greed, aversion, delusion in a relational way, not in a vipassana way. So we get to the dear friend. We'll have more to say about this, but we get to the dear friend. What gets purified there is attachment. We get to the neutral person. What gets purified there is delusion. And of course, when we get to the difficult category, what gets purified there is dosa. So we use these different relationships to deepen our capacity to abide in metta no matter what, when faced with challenges of greed, attachment, challenges of disconnection, challenges of anger, resentment, any form of ill will. So the relationships are the ground of this practice. The seed is the phrase. And every time we say the phrase and connect with it, it's like planting a seed. And just as when you are planting a garden, you don't grow the seed, you just plant it. That seed has its own life. All we have to do is keep planting seeds in a continuous way, as Sayadaw said, again and again. May my teacher be well, happy, and peaceful. May my teacher be well, happy, and peaceful. May my teacher be well, happy, and peaceful. Go along the row and plant seeds. So the person in that relationship, this is the focus of our metta phrase. But of course, that isn't the metta, that relationship, nor actually is the phrase. We simply use the phrase as a tool to incline the mind to loving kindness and to connect with what it is as a mind state, to connect with that quality of heart that is friendliness, that is well-wishing, that is that tender protectiveness, wanting that being to be well, happy, peaceful. So the phrase is what points the mind to metta. We use it as a tool as long as we need to. Sometimes in the practice, it gets in the way and we can let it go if the metta is strong and powerful and we can just keep it going without the phrase. That's usually for most people later on in the retreat. But please know that the phrase is not the metta. That's just language. Metta is expressed in the phrase, expressed in the words. But the metta is the heartfelt connection to the meaning, knowing what that is, and really coming from the heart. So when there is the connection to that phrase, connection to the meaning of that phrase, that's the metta. So this requires a bit of mindfulness, not in the vipassana sense, but just being aware of what the phrase is, not repeating it as a mantra, knowing what you're saying. And in the practice, as we repeat the phrase, there are various things you can do to encourage that connection. The first is to notice if the phrase is being repeated mechanically or quickly without much connection, just to be aware of that and to know, oh, okay, this is just a mantra. This isn't metta. This isn't connecting. So, in a moment when you notice that, to just pause and then begin to say the phrase more slowly. So, it can sound, for example, something like this. As a mantra, may I be well, happy, and peaceful. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May I be well, happy, and okay. I'm not connecting here. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. Slow it down. Put a little tiny pause in the phrase to connect with the meaning of the important words there. And if you're connected to the words that are less important, you can eventually simplify it. So, my teacher, well, happy, peaceful. So, to be very sensitive to whether you're actually connecting, because this is what brings the metta naturally to the surface. And the beauty of the universality of metta is, as expressed in our chanting, what language you use, what words you use, don't matter. In the chanting, whether we're chanting in Burmese or English or Swiss German or Spanish, Sanskrit, it's the same thing, the same metta. That each of you has your own birth language. So Sayadaw often says, find a simple phrase in your birth language, in your own language. And I was thinking, oh, there are at least a dozen languages in this room. And every one of them is perfect for the cultivation of metta because they speak to the heart. They're the first language we heard, even when we were in utero, when our mother was carrying us in her body. We could hear that language. And so that language is a language that's almost cellular in each of us, whatever that birth language happens to be. And that mother and child metaphor given in the text, I think, is so beautiful here because infants have no language and potentially any language. You know, the love of a mother, the protection of a mother is independent of language in the first months of a child's life. The child doesn't understand necessarily the words it hears, he or she hears, but it understands the love. It understands the connection. It understands, he or she understands the metta. So the metta is independent of the words in the phrase, the language of the phrase, the perfection of the phrase. It's so common that people try to find the perfect phrase. Any phrase is perfect so long as you can connect with it. So please don't worry. Any phrase that you can connect with is good enough. Simple, short, your own language are good. So using the relationship, using the person as the ground of this, planting the seed of metta or inclining to metta with the phrase, using that and the continuity of that to cause metta to arise by itself. And the continuity here cannot be undervalued or overstated. Continuity is so important. Continuity in all postures, continuity in all activities, continuity no matter what. So this is, Sayadaw, the way he expresses this, just keep repeating the phrase over and over and over. And we tend to think of formal practice as opposed to informal practice, one being more important than the other. In the context of what you're doing in a retreat, everything is formal practice. Whether it's in here, sitting and walking, whether it's walking to the dining room, taking care of the body. That continuity is so important. And it's something that manifests when somebody's very deeply practiced in this. There's a beautiful description of what it was like to be around Deepa Ma, who was a student of Mahasi Sayadaw, who had really strong metta paramis. She had beautiful practice. And she was described as having no boundaries in terms of what practice was. So that meditation, being a mother, general activities, they all just flowed into each other as one and the same thing. And it was all just Dhamma. So this is what we strive for here, that flow, that continuity of inclination. All just, in this case, metta. And one reminder, we've already said this, but just to emphasize it, because metta is a natural state of mind, it's something that the mind will naturally do when there is neither greed, aversion, or delusion. If you find yourself trying to create something and send it, as Arya said this morning, pause and just go back to the simplicity of saying the phrase, connecting with the meaning of that. We don't create metta. We don't send it. It radiates by itself. Metta will do its own job. We don't have to do the job of metta for it. So all we need to do in this practice is to provide the conditions for metta to naturally arise. That continuity of inclination, that continuity of connection. That does the work of the practice. So please just keep it simple. Say the phrase, connect with meaning, do that as continuously as you can in a relaxed way. Whenever you realize something else is happening, pause, begin again. That's all. It's ridiculously simple. Somebody asked yesterday, am I getting something wrong? Is it really that simple? Or maybe it was the day before somebody asked this. And I thought, yeah, it's really that simple. It really is that simple. We don't have to create metta and send it, fortunately. It's a good thing we don't. It does its own work. And then one more thing to clarify about feeling. We speak sometimes about the metta feeling or feeling metta. Metta isn't the feeling either. To really clarify that. because that's something it's very easy to get attached to as, oh, this is metta, this feeling can arise. So when we have access to this natural state of heart that is called metta, feeling, affective feeling, and physical sensations can arise. It's natural. They can be quite strong. They can be very subtle. They're pretty much universally pleasant, which can be a trap. But that feeling, that experience is a side effect of the presence of metta. It's not the metta itself. Please remember that. We can get so attached to these feelings, and when they go away, as they can when metta is very strong and the concentration is very strong, things can get very peaceful and calm and quiet still. There's still the well wishing, but there's no feeling. If we're attached to feeling, people can have a moment of panic thinking their practice has gone backwards when it's actually gone forwards. So please don't get attached to those feelings as metta. Well, those are two things that I just said. Please don't um, think that those feelings are metta. And then, of course, not to be attached to any practice experience because that's just suffering. That thunder was a emphasis from somewhere. The devas were agreeing. Yeah. The feeling is pleasant. The feeling is a wonderful manifestation of a good practice, but it's not the metta. As I said, it's a side effect. It's not the main event. The main event is that really simple connection with benevolent well wishing for yourself or others or all beings. And the texts speak about metta when it's well developed, as in the chant we do, the Metta Sahagatena chant. Boundless, exalted, immeasurable, without any boundary between the metta for ourselves and the metta for a dear friend, a benefactor, an enemy, all beings, all the same. This is this kind of vast, boundless, immeasurable metta is a little hard to imagine from our worldly perspective. So don't try. Don't try to imagine it. You will experience it in this retreat. Maybe just a glimmer, maybe a lot. Just inclining the mind there with the phrase, just connecting with that over and over and over again is plenty. It's enough. We start easy and build momentum here. The one main rule of the metta practice is always stay where it's easy until the metta is established and then go deeper. It's like entering the ocean or a body of water. Get in with your toes first, and then when you're used to that, you get a little deeper and deeper, and pretty soon you're swimming. So we start easy. And the better established the metta is now with this relatively easy category, the easier it will be later. So there's no hurry. We have time, which is such a wonderful thing to have the luxury of this time to practice together. Um, there's no rush. The metta will arise. And in many of you, it already has. So just keep inclining, keep cultivating this simple well wishing, phrase by phrase by phrase. Encouraging continuity is the most important thing right now. Because that's at the beginning of the retreat. What often is a little weak in places, especially general activities. So when you go into the dining room, when you're doing activities, don't forget what you're here to do. May I be well, happy, and peaceful as you brush your teeth, serving food. Keep the phrase going. Go to yourself if it's easier to do that. But maintaining that continuity is the most important thing right now. And in doing that, even if we can't completely connect, please don't be dissatisfied with that. That's a focus on the negative. Focus on the fact that you're doing what you're doing and understand that even if we can't completely connect, you're creating a habit of inclination. And there are a couple of aspects of this practice. One aspect is developing that habit of inclination. The other aspect is the purification that happens along the way. The habit part is something that we tend to undervalue because it's not really dramatic, but it's really important. And a couple of you have mentioned, oh, yeah, since I started doing this metta practice and have really engaged in it in my daily life, the phrases go in the background all the time. That's that habit. That's great. You might not be completely connected, but there is that established habit, and that can't be overstated. The value of that can't be overstated. Not forgetting the power of metta. It will do its own work by itself. So metta as the protection of a mother for a child really emphasizes the aspect of protection and the power of metta. And I love how Sayalay began his talk the other day with the story, the framing story of the Metta Sutta, the story of these monks who were frightened by the devas who were haunting them. And he offered the practice to these monks. He said, this is your practice and your protection. And it's so for all of us as well. This is our practice and this is our protection. The monks were haunted by tree devas. We're all haunted by something. We come with conditioning. We come with wherever our mind happens to habitually abide. We come with fears, traumas. The intensity of life can haunt us, but metta is the protection that allows us to work with that and abide with that and see through those hauntings to the truth of the way things are. So the benevolent regard for ourselves, for living beings, looking on to the world with kindly eyes, tenderly, without demands, judgment, any kind of agenda, any kind of preferences. This is what offers that profound inner protection. It's what gives us space to work with all of that. And it's why it's, as Sayadaw said in his opening talk, you can't do Vipassana without metta. You really can't. You have to have the metta attitude to be successful in the Vipassana practice. And it's the metta attitude and the metta for ourselves and whatever arises that gives us a space to do that inner work. And that gives us the space to work with the world outside the way it is without needing to change that. So I wanted to close with some lines, verses from the Dhammapada. This is Dhammapada 42 and 43. Speaking to the danger of dosa and the power of metta. Whatever an enemy may do to an enemy or haters to one another, far worse is the harm from one's own wrongly directed mind. Neither mother nor father nor any other relative can do one as much good as one's own well-directed mind. So may we all develop the skill and capacity to direct our minds to metta, and may this powerful practice liberate us from dosa and allow us to practice vipassana successfully so that we may attain Magapala Nibbana in the shortest possible time. Thank you for your kind attention, everybody.